Jerry, you ever think your house was designed by a monkey?
Yes.
That's because it was.
What is happening, you beautiful bastards?
Welcome back, you beautiful bastards, to another week. I don't know what the fuck we're doing here. Jerry, what are we doing?
Well, like usual, we got a cool guest coming on. I don't want to call him Australian, but he's in Australia.
He is in Australia. Isn't he from Jersey?
He is. He went from one hellhole to another.
Different reasons to hellholes, though.
Yeah. Well, in Australia, everything wants to kill you instead of just the people.
That's true. It's true. And
yeah.
We're changing up format a little bit this week, if you guys couldn't tell. We're dropping the news for now. It's not... If you really enjoy this segment, it's coming back. Don't worry about it. It's just going to be in another format.
Yeah. So we're making some changes to the structure and kind of making that its own thing in the future. So it's going to come back. You guys are still going to be able to listen to it. But in every episode going forward, how we're going to kind of structure the new segment at the beginning is really just going to be like our takeaways for the episode, what you guys should be looking out for, things like that.
Because more and more we're noticing when we're doing it, especially we're pre-recording things, and we're noticing more and more that afterwards we're having questions, afterwards we're having thoughts about the conversations we're having, and hopefully we can bring them up so you guys can think about them during the show, or we're going to see what your thoughts are and bring them up after the show. And it's not that we didn't like the news, just we thought it would suit better in other places.
I love the news because I just like making fun of everything. But that being said, this episode was pretty cool. Not really what I expected. I guess I didn't really expect anything going into it. But I did find after we were done with that episode, I really want a passive solar house.
I kind of realized that my house is passive solar already. Not perfectly, because I don't think my house is built in the 60s. No one designed it that way on purpose.
No.
But a lot of, I think while he was talking, I realized a lot of the features of my house kind of are already included in that.
And I realized a lot of the features of my house completely suck.
Yeah, Jerry, who are we actually talking to this week?
So this is a guy named Keith Hutchings, and he runs the Comfortable Home Project website. And we're going to have some show notes for you guys to check out what he's up to. But he'll be the perfect guy to tell you what he does. So why don't we roll right into that?
Yeah. Okay. How's that? I've just kind of guessed.
What do you think, Andy?
It's fine for me, but I'm deaf.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So you want me? Well, I will be waving my hands around a lot. So
You're fine. I can still amplify on my own my computer. I should probably turn.
yeah, the wonders of industrial deafness.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't say I'm deaf, but I definitely struggle to hear certain things. Like my wife talking. I know she's saying something. I can hear it. I just don't know what the words are.
Well,
There's a really funny thing about that, very much aside from podcasting. They did a test with a whole bunch of old farmers up in the wheat belt here. They sent a van out and did a whole bunch of hearing tests. And they found all these guys who, spent their whole lives working on the backs of tractors. They could hear in the ranges where their mates deep farmer voices were, but they couldn't hear in the higher range. The noise damage damaged the range where the female voice mostly operates. So that's not just a myth.
That's where I'm
actually, it's not just spousal deafness. It's actually the damage. So, yeah.
Yeah, Andy and I actually both have to get our hearing checked once a year at work.
Right.
And so they show it to us, and the higher pitches, I thought Andy's is probably the same, but in the higher pitch range, my hearing dips.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's, it's science. And for me, it's they call it the figure ground. It's the noise separation. I went to this event recently, and there was basically a bridge between two buildings, and some bright spark had decided to put glass doors all down either side of it and turn it into an enclosed meeting space. But poured concrete ceiling and glass walls, not a single soft furniture in the whole place. Put 200 people in that room.
It's awful.
And at one point I was talking to a guy who's very soft spoken, and I just said, look, we have to go outside because I cannot hear a word you're saying. Soft spoken, fairly strong Asian accent. I'm getting nothing. Even the waving of the hands was not coming through.
That's
so
my
yeah,
with masks now because I can't read lips.
yeah. That's something you might want to work on. That's easily
so I'll start
fixed.
reading the masks.
Yeah. I don't think we realized how much we read lips. I realized that watching foreign films that are dubbed in, and it's like, I can't hear what they're saying because their lip movements don't match
or
their
if it's
voices.
A badly timed video.
I thought you said mass. Like
no masks.
Yeah, mass, like Catholic mass, like yeah.
Oh, geez,
yeah.
no.
Yeah, that's that. And then you said, "Yeah, I can't read lips," and it was like, I'm catching up here. I'm catching up here.
I can't hear because of the
mass. Yeah, I was a little slow on the uptake there on that one.
No worries.
Yeah, I just thought it was hilarious. That's why I told you. It's like mask. He can't understand the priest. Just sit in the front row.
Nope, never.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. Quick question: who's your audience? Sure. What kind of? Do you have an age range idea of who you?
So the strongest demographic group for our audience is about 24 to 44.
Yep.
But the age range is really from about 15 to 70, and it's more men than women. Not significantly so, but it's really worldwide too. How many countries, Andy? Is like 22 or something like that now?
Yeah, I stopped paying attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, right. And that's scientific. Interesting because the primary take-up of these kind of houses is middle-aged women. Well, that's where the interest is. Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah. The men go, I want to buy a house and I want to be able to sell it. And the women go, I want to buy a house and I want to be comfortable. So
yeah, that's true.
We'll see if we can bring the boys around to the way.
I know. I mean, we'll get into that in the episode, but I know a lot of the men I talk to, but they're all very mechanical, scientific. They're pretty game for it.
We'll save that for the conversation.
Yes.
First, let's introduce
sorry, we're having
Keith.
too much fun.
I know.
All right, Jerry, enough of that bullshit. What do we got going on today?
All right, today we've got a special guest. His name is Keith Hutchings from the Comfortable Home Project. Keith, thanks for being on the show. How you doing?
I'm great. It's a little after 8 in the morning here. It's just poured with rain recently. We're just heading into winter weather. And yeah, I'm having more fun than a grown man ought to be allowed to have. So
meanwhile, it's springtime here at 8:00 at night.
Yeah, it's confusing, isn't it?
Now, it might confuse our audience to know that we are so far apart in time zones. Where are you right now?
I'm in Perth, Western Australia. So you guys are on the east coast of America, and this is actually as far geographically as you can go and be on land in either direction around the world.
Sweet.
Which is how you deal with having a crazy family, is just run until if you run anymore, you will start getting closer to them again.
So obviously you don't sound Australian. Where are you from?
I grew up in northern New Jersey, but I've lived here for 30 years now, so a little over 30 years. So if I talk to my American friends, they say, oh, you don't have much of an accent. But if I talk to Australians, they go, you still have such an accent. And, I ring up my clients and their kids will answer the phone and they'll go, Mom, there's some American on the phone. And how do they know that? Because I forget that I have this strange accent. So, yeah.
Now, this isn't really related to comfortable homes, but why why do you not have an Australian accent after 30 years?
Because
I'd be on board with trying to have one.
New Jersey sucked it out of him before he left.
There's a funny thing. I don't have the Australian accent, which I can't imitate without offending everyone, but there are a bunch of words that were used differently. So I went back to America about 7 years ago. My mother passed away. I spent like 6 weeks there cleaning up her estate. And I think everyone I ran into thought I was retarded, brain injured. We're not supposed to use that word anymore. But in my case, it sort of was because I would go, oh, yeah, just put that in the, oh, shit, they don't call it boot. They call it, put it in the trunk. Or, would you have, it's not torch, it's flashlight. Yes, would you have a flashlight? And then I got back here and I was the maintenance person for a school. And I would say, oh, just ring me on my cell phone. And the kids, because they watch all American TV, they were like, he said cell phone. It's so cool. Yeah. It's not the accent. It's the words. It's the translation. So
you become a bit of a local celebrity there.
Yeah, I'm working on it. Well, mostly in my own mind. Yes.
That's the most important place.
Yeah. That's the one.
So, you have something called the Comfortable Home Project. Did you start that here in America or when you went to Australia?
No, I started, when I was in America, I was working as a theater tech. So as a freelancer in New York, had nothing to do with housing. Houses were just a place you went to. It was only coming here. I decided about 6 years ago that kind of everybody has to do something about climate change. And that my thing would be to change the way we build houses here. So it's something that changed. And part of that comes out of the fact that working as a handyman. In the last 4 years, I've been in something like 800 to 1,000 houses. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of an expert on how not to do housing. I say to people, I have written a PhD, except for I haven't really, on how not to do housing, because I know more about how not to do housing than anyone in Australia, because I've been in so many houses. A builder might build 15 houses, a custom builder might build 15 houses a year. An architect might design 5 houses a year. I've been in 1,000, and most of them are shit.
I was to say, Gary and I have both worked on mechanical things, and we usually curse out the engineers.
Well, yeah, of course, because, that's the thing is most architects, most engineers have never actually held a wrench in their hand.
Nope.
Well, that was the biggest thing I ran into. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a whole nother rabbit hole. I was trying to convince, I knew somebody who was the head of the architecture department at a local university, and he was in the process of rewriting their undergraduate degree. And I was trying to convince them that every student going through the program should do a semester of working on a Habitat for Humanity house where they're actually swinging a hammer and driving in nails and screws and things. I didn't succeed.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
No, you'll never change their mind on it. But being in that many houses, you basically were in the service industry for the building industry. Yeah. So you get to see what happens when people do things the wrong way. Where if they do it the wrong way, they never see it again. It's your problem after that.
Yeah. Well, it's just like going into a house where it's just like one of the houses I worked in, the clients left for the day and just left me in there. And of course, because they weren't going to be home, they turned the air conditioning off. And very quickly it got up. It was, maybe a 40-degree day outside. Celsius, not freedom units. And inside it very quickly got up to 50 degrees. But they're up on top of a ridge overlooking a river. They're set back from the river. The wind is howling through there, but the house is not designed in any way to take advantage of that breeze to pull the heat out of the house. So they are running air conditioning 24/7 while it's cooler outside in the summer afternoon. And then
they're fighting everything, all the heat absorption from the sun and everything else as well.
Yeah, they just freeze their tits off all winter because the house isn't designed to bring in the sun and heat up the mass of the house. So,
and that's, I guess it makes sense how that kind of steered you in the direction of passive solar, which is something you're big on. And I used to be in the HVAC industry doing everything from residential all the way up to commercial and industrial. So I had a similar experience to you where I get to go in after the fact and see what everybody fucked up and the consequence of it, really. So that was what got me into passive solar. But there's a lot of people that have never even heard of it, even though a lot of them have actually seen a passive solar house.
Oh, it's, what I keep saying to people is climate change is a marketing problem, not a technical problem. We know all the solutions. And anybody who's been in a passive solar house says, I want to live like this. But 90% of the people I speak to, I talk about passive solar, they go, is that like solar panels? And I think,
so what is
we really fucked the branding. These days I'm trying to introduce the phrase high performance homes, because I basically polled a whole bunch of marketers. We need to get the phrase eco and sustainable and all that green out of, because there's a whole bunch of people who read those words and they say, that translates to them to twice as expensive and half as good. But,
that's a good point.
Yeah. So there are people in the world who are so competitive that when their energy bill arrives, if it's bigger than it was the month before, they get really excited. They feel like they've won. Are you like that?
Opposite.
No.
I've never met anyone like that, but I believe those people exist. And if you're not like one of those, and you're building a house and you're building it so then it will require all sorts of energy, then that doesn't make sense. If you don't enjoy paying your electricity bill, then the best thing to do is build a house that's going to be designed to be warm in the winter and cool in the summer with minimal additional energy. And that's what passive solar is really all about.
So what is passive solar, though?
Good. I'm glad you asked this question. This is one of the problems is we talk to the converted. So at its most simple, passive solar is orientating the house so that the sun comes in the winter to warm the mass of the house. So the concrete floors, walls, something that's got, beef to it so it can absorb that heat. And then through the night, it then radiates that heat back out again. And then in summer, you want to keep the heat out of the house. So, covering the windows so that the sun isn't coming in them and opening up the house so that the breeze can come in through the house and flush the house out, or like natural convection. So I work in houses where they have no opening windows on the second floor. So I've got friends who have to abandon the third floor of their house every summer because it gets so hot up there that, human beings can't survive. So that's what passive solar is. We go into all these stuff, but nobody wants to hear that.
I got you. I understand it.
But it's designing the house. So passive solar is a design solution to housing rather than where solar panels or something like that is a technical solution. And technology will always eventually fail. The solar panels, people say, well, why don't I just bung a bunch of solar panels? And then the other side of that, you could put a whole bunch of solar panels on your house to eliminate the energy cost. But then the way we deal with that, just cover your ears, Jerry, as a HVAC technician, you don't want to hear this right now. But what we do is we enclose the house, we close it up, and then we refrigerate the stank. So,
Yes.
The question I've been asking people is, if you came home of an evening and you found that your teenager had put their gym shoes in the fridge, would you be happy? Or would you be seriously disturbed? But that's what we're doing with our houses. We're closing them up and then we're refrigerating everything that's nasty in it. The cooking smells, the mildew, the dampness. We're just making it cool and comfortable.
It's true, because like I've had central air for a while, and once you have central air, you're spoiled. And you're going to use it like on days you don't even really need to. It's just the house is a little bit warm, but if you open up all your windows, you'd be fine.
Well, as an HVAC guy or a former HVAC guy now, I can tell you 100% air conditioning is disgusting.
Okay.
Most people they never think about their ductwork, but your ductwork is just like if you crawled around in there and you had a compromised immune system, you're going to be dead in a week.
Or you'll be able to survive anything.
Yes. I wouldn't make a habit of crawling in there, but great way to build up that immune system. You're basically bringing a giant petri dish into your house. And often out, like here in the summer, inside my house, because I don't live in a passive solar house, inside the house, I'll be boiling. But if I went outside, I'd be in a long sleeve shirt because it's, like a flannel shirt because it's that cool outside. But because of the way my house is designed as an anti-passive solar house, there's no way to bring that cool air into the house. It just doesn't flow into the house.
Is acting like a convection oven.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. My house, well, I have a theory, as a scientist, and as scientists, you would understand this theory. My theory is that our houses are designed by lizards. Now, it makes sense.
People.
You're thinking lizards. Is this man insane?
No.
You're with me on this.
Yep.
Our houses are designed to be hot in the summer and cold in the winter. Now, who likes that? Lizards. They love it. It's, 50 degrees inside the house all summer long, and then they hibernate in the winter, so they don't care. And it's like, that's the only logical explanation for the way we build our houses is lizards.
That might give some strength to the lizard Illuminati theory.
That's where I was about to go. Yeah,
the royal family. They're
right.
behind it all. Yeah. Shape-shifting lizards.
We're completely confused about that because I've never understood that one.
We know what's wrong with standard houses. I mean, I have a 2-story cape myself, and in the summer, I don't even want to go upstairs, and it's really well insulated. So passive solar is a better alternative because it's naturally much cooler in the summer. So what's the biggest difference between how my house is built, which is a 2-story cape, and a passive solar house?
Probably the biggest difference is orientation. What most builders are doing is they have a set of maybe 10, maybe 20 different designs, and you pick one out and then they plunk it on the block with no thought to where does the sun come from and where does the breeze come from. So I see a lot of what I call anti-passive solar houses. They're built perfectly backwards.
Right.
And so like a friend of mine she had taught herself enough about passive solar she knew more about it than me. And so she went off to these volume builders. She found they had kind of a weird shaped block. She found a house that would fit perfectly on their weird shaped block. And all they had to do was flip over the design, do with a mirror image of what they were offering. And she would have had about an 80% passive solar house.
Damn.
So, massively better performance than if she built it the other way. And then an architect looked at that drawing and he just moved a few rooms around, kind of widened some hallways or maybe narrowed hallways. I don't really remember. And that would have given her like a 90% passive solar house. But the builder would have very happily built it perfectly backwards. So the way the drawing was done, it put all of the bedrooms down the northern side. So we're in the southern hemisphere. Everything's reversed. It's confusing. But somebody, said you point the main living rooms towards the equator to clear up that
towards the sun.
Sunward is the way. So by putting the bedrooms down that northern side, they would have had a house that was, the bedrooms when you go to sleep are really hot because they've heated up from the sun through the day in the summer. And then because you don't have big windows in a bedroom, there's very little sun coming into the house, so the house is freezing all winter. By flipping the drawing, you put the living areas down on that sunward side, get the sun in to heat up the floor. One of the interviews I did recently, the guy was saying he's got these on the northern side, or the sunward side, he's got these big concertina glass doors. So the sun just pours in the winter, warms up that floor. He can open those doors up. And he said his daughters come home and they just lie on the floor where the sun comes in. And that's where they hang out in winter because the floor is so toasty warm. It's the most comfortable place in the house. And, circling back to the energy idea, this guy when they poured the concrete floor, they put the tubes in for the subfloor heating. They never spent the $4,000 to buy the heat pump because they don't need it.
That's cool.
The house is just naturally warm enough. So they've got the capacity to do the subfloor heating. And I'm really bummed by this because I love subfloor heating, having been in one house in North America that had it and was like, oh, the floor is toasty warm. Someday I'm going to have a house with subfloor heating. And now this guy's saying it's a waste of money. You don't need it. I'm bummed. Yeah. Did I answer your question? I tend to just crap around in circles.
No, that's okay. We don't mind. So I understand you want to put your living spaces on the sun side or the sunward side, right? Makes sense. So, and what would you do for as far as for cooling effect is with wind?
So then that is a matter of having the house to be openable to the prevailing breeze in summer. So here in Perth, the prevailing breeze comes out of the southwest. So you combine the shape of the roof so that and then where the orientation of the doors. So I went into a house we have a thing here called Sustainable House Day. And I went into the house and we're going outside. It's the first day the end of September. It's the first really hot day. So it's about 30 degrees out. Somebody can translate that into freedom units. I've forgotten.
90, I think, right?
Yeah, it's the first really hot day of the, beginning of spring. And we're standing outside, we're talking, and he says, it's really hot out here. Should we step inside? We step inside the house. It's 10 degrees cooler inside the house. And I've got this howling gale blowing down the back of my neck. And I'm like, this fucker. He calls this a sustainable house. He's got a fucking air conditioner. And so I'm in full outrage. And I turn around there and there is no air conditioner there. What I'm feeling is the breeze. It's an infill block. So it's a battle axe where they've built a house in the backyard and did the driveway down the side. And the house has been designed so that driveway and then the orientation of the front door creates a narrow opening, and then the big sliding doors on the opposite side And in a way that I do not understand, the shape of the roof created an airfoil. Because when I stepped outside up to the street, there was no breeze.
Yeah, they've
but
created
inside
a Venturi
this
effect.
guy's house, there was a tornado coming through.
Yep. It works the same way as a carburetor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I knew you'd understand.
Big
That's why.
Opening for your inlet and a small opening for your outlet. You have a Venturi effect, and it'll increase velocity.
Exactly.
I just nerded out on everyone, but there you go.
And so then the other thing, well, everybody's got to have a hobby. So then the other thing is you're talking about your 2-story house. So then being able to enclose your staircase so that there's a door to close so the heat from the downstairs doesn't go up to the upstairs.
Right.
And then, so there are a lot of different, and then the other thing is keeping the heat out, the sun away from those windows. So what a lot of people do is they'll have shade cloth that goes like up in the summer and comes down in the winter, so that, what people are, so a lot of houses are built with longer roof eaves, because the sun is higher in the sky in the summer and then lower in the sky in the winter. So the sun can come in under those roof eaves and in the winter and heat the mass of your floor. But what a guy was explaining to me recently was what you need to do is shade your house up to 3 meters away from the windows, because if the sun is coming in just in front of your house and you've got something like brick paving, that brick paving can be up to 20 degrees hotter than the ambient air temperature because it just soaks up the heat. Yeah. And so then that brick paving or driveway, whatever, is radiating heat into the house. So you want to keep that shaded so it keeps a bit cooler. So it's getting the breeze in, getting the heat out, and keeping the heat from coming in and warming up the mass of your home. That's the summer thing.
30 degrees Celsius is 86 degrees in freedom units.
That's what they'll be known as on this show forever now.
From now on.
Excellent, of course, yeah. Well, we're Redditors, so we have to use these terminologies that we'll be thrown off the platform.
So having a passive solar house takes and I feel like they probably need to work on the name for it, but it takes a little work. Like there's things you're gonna have to do. It's not just, you're not just sitting there doing nothing. Change your seasons. You're gonna have to put out awnings or whatever else, like you're saying, to cool patio areas and everything that are within that. You said 3 meters, I believe.
Yeah. So,
but that's not a lot of work for what you're getting out of it.
It is passive solar. There are ways of doing these things. You spend more money. They can be more, automatic. There's a method called passive house, which is another way of doing this. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but it's closing curtains during the day when you get up in the morning in the summer so the sun can't come in. It's opening curtains in the morning in the winter and closing them at night. There is some thought. But having said that, I did interview a guy who had a house in an area called Bridgetown, which is south of Perth. I call it Fridge Town. It's consistently the coldest temperatures in the state in winter here. It's inland, it's a valley. And he came up to Perth for a week and he went back to his house. So nobody was in the house. It was just all closed up. And he said the outside temperature was, hovering around at night 1-2 degrees Celsius. So fucking cold.
Yeah, that's cold.
And inside the house it was 23 degrees.
No, that's pretty good.
Yeah,
23 degrees is kind of between 20 and 25 degrees Celsius. Those are the human temperature range, which is actually a really narrow band that we're comfortable in. And that's so you know how you've been away for a while and you come back to the house and it's all been closed up, and in the summer it's just boiling in there, or you come back, you've been away for a week, you come back in the house in the winter and it's freezing. Well, in North America you have furnaces and things, but nobody has heating here. So you walk into the house and it's just freezing, and then you spend 2 days trying to get some heat back into it. His house was just, walk in, comfortable temperature. No energy had been used,
he had a very efficient house.
Paid for, and 23 degrees. So
is there anything, it makes great sense for when you're designing a house, right? That's the best time to do it. But is there anything people who aren't designing a house that could implement it in their already pre-built house? Besides uprooting?
Yeah. Look, I'm not an architect and I'm not a building designer. There are lots of people who have done renovations on houses, because there's a lot more existing houses. And it is. There are some houses where it just doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. It's the house is so wrong that it would be cheaper to bulldoze it and start again.
There's probably plenty of those.
Yeah. But then someone who's an experienced building designer can say, I can come in, perhaps we replace all of your crappy old aluminum windows or timber windows that are really rattly and leaky with double glazing. My house has no insulation in the walls. So if we filled the wall cavities with, either the blow-in cellulose or something like that, it would make a huge difference. We have really crappy insulation in the roof. So even just insulating your roof is going to be a big improvement. There are a lot of things, replacing your windows with double glazing is going to make a big difference, particularly in winter. And will also make a difference because what happens with the single glazing is you get condensation collecting on the inside, and then that condensation will often be collecting below the windows, which can cause even more mold and mildew in your house, which you're then enclosing and refrigerating. So shit that can kill you slowly and painfully, and it hurts the whole time you're dying, and we're refrigerating it to make it nicer. Sorry, I do tend to get carried away, but anyway. So yes, there are lots of things. What you need to do is find somebody, even a builder, who has experience in this area, which is why on the website we've set up a service provider list. So that, because I realized a lot of people are choosing their builders because it's a guy that they, or their architect, whatever, because he's a guy that they met at the tennis club, or they,
I've always found it interesting, the reason that people go, like, you'd think if you're having a builder come to your house and they're doing a renovation, right? I've had this conversation with multiple different people. They typically go with the cheapest one, right? Because they don't want to spend all the money on. Okay, makes sense. But I'll look at them and be like, if you're going to go buy a TV, you're going to buy the cheapest TV? No, they're going to buy a fucking expensive ass TV because they want a good one. So why are you buying a cheap builder who's building something you're going to live in? It doesn't make any damn sense.
And then complain about, shonky builders and all of
they
that.
Suck. They're awful.
Yeah. It's like,
I know a guy who had a deck built and he had it redone 3 times because they couldn't get it right. And I said, well, you went with the cheapest one, right? Yep. Makes sense.
Yeah.
You got what you paid for. When you're getting something like that done, don't go with the cheapest person. I understand it sucks because it's expensive as fuck, but come on.
Yes, exactly. It's like put some time in researching it. That's why, people don't want to pay, it's if you get a building designer, what most people do, they're going to do renovations. They meet their mate down at the tennis club. He says, "Oh yeah, I'm a builder." They go, "Oh, okay, do you want to come and quote on this renovation I'm thinking of doing?" The guy rocks up. He says, "Oh yeah, sure. We can just bung that spare room on the back or whatever." But the value is in getting somebody in who has that experience and, paying a couple of grand to a building designer who can go, if you, while you're doing this, you make this wall a whole bunch of sliding doors. So you've got the glass to bring in you're going to have a whole difference. If you enclose that staircase so that the heat you're not getting a chimney effect up to the second floor. Somebody who can actually think about those things, and then you can make budget choices.
You also, you're saving in the long run.
Yeah. But it's more than the savings. I think it's beyond, the money is there, but having my family much healthier. First of all, they're in a comfortable temperature, which is better for their health. And then, part of that design is designing a house so that it doesn't encourage mold and mildew to grow, which is really, really bad for us. And, like I've got a client, the bathroom, all the kitchens and bathrooms in the house are down the south side of the house. So that roof, it's an A-frame roof that runs east-west. So the south side of the house never gets any sun. And so he had his whole ceiling in his bathroom was covered in mildew. Basically, I had to come in and rip the whole ceiling down in order to fix that, because the house never gets any sun. He's got a teenager, so, hour-long showers and the whole thing.
Ceiling fans, people.
Yeah, well, most ceiling fans here in Australia, I don't know what they're like in America, they just go up and they pull the moisture up into the roof cavity.
Yeah. I saw that a lot when I was doing HVAC, where people were dumping humid air somewhere that was, it wasn't where it was coming from, but it was going somewhere where it was creating a situation for serious mold. And actually, in my own house, I went out of my way to make sure they vented all the way outside.
Yeah, if I'm putting a ceiling fan in for somebody, I kind of insist, we need to get that out, because what the kitchen ceiling fans do is actually worse, because they'll just dump it up into the roof space and you're pulling all that sort of greasy air up, and it just puts out a gigantic neon sign all around your house, like Las Vegas, that says "Rodents welcome here." Let's fill our house, the roof space of our house, with grease and food smells, and then be surprised when the rats move in. So, get it out of the house. Yes.
In my own house, actually, the south side, all year. I've lived in my house 3 years now, and I monitored it because I had a lot of moss on the back, and I have to clean it like 2 or 3 times a year. It has never in its entire life seen the sun. Yeah. And in fact, my front, of course, being north, I have one passive solar option in the front because I have the full-size glass storm door. So what I do is in the early morning, probably like 7 a.m. to 12, I can open the big door and just have the storm door shut. And as long as it's sunny, the heat is pouring in through that door. So that helps me in the winter, but in the summer, my God, is that terrible.
Yeah. So some shade sails out the front, something like that, to keep that sun out. One of the things people do is they build like a pergola. Yeah. So like a frame, an open frame, and then they grow something like grapevines up it. Something that will drop all of its leaves in the winter, but it will create that shade and a little kind of garden space. And if you really do it right, give you some food.
I like that idea.
Yeah, I love grapes.
Peel me another grape, darling. Yes. Yeah, and you can even grow wine grapes. My neighbor did that for years. Yeah. make up some grappia. Or,
But see, so that's an idea that people could do that. That they're not rebuilding a house or designing a house off the bat, but they can do that.
Exactly. It can be sometimes these marginal improvements that just make it a little bit better. You put a pelmet on the curtains up at the top, so the heat, your heat isn't pouring down through there.
You put a helmet on top of your curtains.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll translate into English. You can see behind me there's the curtains, and if you just make a little box across
like
the top, just a timber thing, it just closes off that gap.
Yeah.
And because you've got that big gap there, the heat of the house is sitting up on the ceiling, comes across, hits the window, and just drops down behind there.
I got you now.
Yeah, sorry. It's English is my second language. It's not nice to make fun of me.
I was following you for almost all of it. There were a couple times in there, but
until all of a sudden you're putting helmets on your curtains.
As soon as we start talking about helmets, I was all done.
So So there are, we've talked about quite a few things here that people can do with their homes, but on the more extreme end of things like passive solar, this is well outside of my budget and probably not easy to do in America. But have you seen, there's a documentary on Earthship style houses. Have you ever heard of those?
I have. I haven't really looked into it too much. Some people are really keen on them, and I think they're really cool. My focus is trying to get this idea out to the mainstream.
Yeah.
And I feel like mainstream people, they don't have to be really, one of the ways that they build Earthships is by stacking walls of tires and then packing the tires with soil. So it's very labor intensive, but it's the kind of thing you can get a bunch of people together and do over the course of a weekend.
Right.
But
So
you're never going to see one in the suburbs.
They have a nice finished product, but it's it's a very eccentric house. But what they do with that, Grizz, if you've never seen one of these,
I've never seen one.
They basically build a house into a hill, but they take all of these ideas, all this passive solar stuff. Mm-hmm. They choose the right hill on the right piece of property, and they integrate everything that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And so for passive solar to be really effective, you want a lot of thermal mass in your house. So it's like concrete floors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, this whole house is thermal mass. So the whole front of the house is all windows. It gets hot throughout the day, and the floors are like 80 degrees. And then by the time you wake up in the morning, the floors are like 60 degrees because there's just so much mass to the house.
It's just a shit ton of concrete.
Just shit ton of concrete and dirt.
I mean, we got plenty of it.
I know.
Yeah. And one of the things I saw that was really cool in one video I watched, they'd actually tunneled into the hillside all the way through to the other side and put that big culvert pipe. They were, foot and a half in diameter or something, stuck that through the hillside. I don't know how I don't remember how they got it through. And that was the air intake into the house. So the air would flow through that culvert going through, the dirt. So the subsoil temperature was a lot cooler. That particular video I watched, the house was in Arizona. So their biggest issue was cooling, and they just pulled in this cool air. So, but, again, I don't give it a lot of attention because I'm trying to get a hold of the mainstream,
Right.
My hippie friends already know about this stuff and they're, but they're all broke as fuck. So they're, they're not building these things unless they live out in the rural areas where they can do that.
It's kind of a problem, in America. I don't know how it is in Australia, but a lot of people, millennials coming up, they can't afford houses. They're too damn expensive.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
If they do afford a house, they're not redesigning it unless they bought Bitcoin or something or Doge.
Well, those are what I realized when I started getting into housing was that there were a whole bunch of other issues. We start with a really broken system where housing is decided, how housing is developed has been decided by the volume builders, the ones who, have the big names that everybody knows, and then the property developers. And they're marketing us on what suits them because they make more money the bigger the house is. So they've been creating this idea that if you don't have stone countertops, if you don't have 19 bathrooms in the house and at least 3 theater rooms, your children will become junkies and will end up in prison. It's do or die there. And you will never sell the house. Basically, if it doesn't have 19 bathrooms, it's completely unsaleable. And so, but the model of the single family house is really a terrible, terrible model, except for my next door neighbor, a couple of streets down. He's an old guy. He goes out, every Saturday and mows his lawn with little handheld clippers and carefully pulls out every weed. So he's getting a lot out of his single family house because that lawn looks like it's just perfect.
Dude, if I was to cut my lawn with shears, with scissors, it better look good.
Yeah. So it's perfect. Every blade of grass. I think he gets a ruler out and measures every one.
Is he one of those guys that won't let you step on his lawn?
I don't know. I've never tried. I'm not risking it. Do I look like a fool? The man has cut his grass with a pair of hand shears. He's going to shoot you.
You're not living.
not risking it. But for everybody else, the most logical thing is some form of community. The biggest issues that we face in the world right now are housing affordability and social isolation.
Oh, God, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, there's a suburb up in the north of Perth called Wanneroo. And I was driving through there recently, and you don't see any people. It's like a zombie apocalypse because what everybody does is they come home, they mash the remote on their garage, and they pull in, and they never get out of their cars in the daylight, which means there's no, hey, Bob, how's the kids?
Yeah.
Kind of interaction because there are no humans on the street. Our houses are designed to facilitate social isolation.
It's true, but Jerry and I have talked about this before on the show where there's so many people, they don't want to talk to someone else. Like, I'll be in my yard doing things with my wife or whatever, and I'll wave at a neighbor and I'll be lucky to get a hello.
Yeah.
I mean...
Because we've kind of been conditioned to that. So one of the great examples that I love of having formerly lived in New York City of some kind of accidental architecture that facilitated social connection is the stoop. So most of the houses that were built in the sort of from the beginning of the 20th century forward had even going back earlier, 1880s, because I used to live in a neighborhood that was mostly developed around the 1880s, and every house has kind of a half basement. So there's a set of maybe 10 steps going up to what is the entrance to the house. I think it's because most of New York is on granite, so they just didn't want to go down into the subsoil very much, because you go down and then you hit fucking granite, which is really hard. And what this created was all of these front steps. So what had happened is that people would hang out on their stoops in the summer, because of course no air conditioning in the houses. And, the kids would be playing ball in the street, and the parents hang around and drink beer and talk and connect and communicate. So, what we need is more housing that facilitates that connection and is cheaper. So that's the first thing with the passive solar is here in Australia. I don't know what it's like in America in terms of numbers, but it's estimated the average person spends $1,500 to $2,000 a year on their energy bills. So, and the majority of that is keeping the house at a comfortable temperature. Now, you know, I mean, there are people that go out for dinner, they spend $2,000 on a bottle of wine, but I don't know any of them. But most people, for most people, $2,000 a year is a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it that way,
yeah. I would assume with the greater cold in America, it would be a lot more. I just don't know the numbers. So you do that, first of all, and then you create a situation with good design where people can share houses, or share resources. You know, there are communities that are growing up where they have one car. And you kind of put up a roster. Okay, I need the car on Tuesday. I need the car on Thursday. Those work in sort of inner city places. And so there's an organization here in Australia called the Nightingale Project. And what they do is they bring in philanthropic funds to cover the cost of the building process, and then they give a capped return on that money. So it's a philanthropic way of dealing with housing affordability. And then what you do is you get all the people together first who are going to live in this place, who have the money to buy the apartment, and you start building that community. And what they found is they would go to people and they would say, okay, if you have one bathroom in your apartment rather than two, it will save you $15,000. If you don't have a carport, it will save you $40,000. And very quickly people go, oh yeah, one bathroom, we can live with that. $15,000 off the mortgage. I don't know how much that works out to when you pay it over a 25-year mortgage, but it's a lot of money. And then they said, if you don't have a laundry in your apartment, then that'll save you another $15,000. And what they did in these buildings, the Nightingale buildings, is that every apartment is the same footprint. So if you knock out the bathroom, you knock out the laundry, you get a bigger living room. And that's suddenly started making sense. But if you're a developer and you have to sell the product to any person who will come along, then you've already pushed the message that you can't live without a laundry and you can't live without two bathrooms. So in this particular one in Melbourne, what they did was they put the laundry on the roof. Most of the time, what buildings do is they put the laundry in the basement. So you have been bad, you have sinned, and your punishment is to go do the laundry down in the basement in this horrible enclosed space. And what they did in Melbourne is they put it up on the roof. And so people started gathering of the evening. They have 3 or 4 washing machines in there, and they hang up on the roof. They run their laundry and drink wine and look out over the city from a 4-story building. And now couples are fighting over whose turn it is to do the washing. So instead of whose turn it is to not do the washing. It's facilitating connection. And, so Friday night is get the laundry done. Oh, and drink 3 bottles of wine while you're up there. But, these kind of idea of, so that's the other side of housing affordability. What a lot of people are doing is they're eliminating the middleman. They're eliminating the property developer and becoming their own property developer by getting a community together. There's a process in Europe called Baugruppen. And that's what they do. In some cities, 75% of the houses are designed as Baugruppen. You get a community together. You decide what that community needs. Maybe you got a bunch of families with kids, so you design the house so you design the apartment block, because these are apartment houses up to 40 families in them, with a central courtyard so the kids can play in there and be safe. So,
see, I feel like we're going in the opposite direction here in America.
I was going to say, America's just getting more and more segregated.
I think we've doubled down on building bigger houses on more private plots of land.
Yes. Yeah. And is it working?
No. Actually, houses are so incredibly expensive here that there are financial institutions that have recommended non-monogamy, so you have 3 incomes instead of 2.
Yeah, you can't afford it with 1. You can't afford it with 2. Well, 3 people.
Yeah, just get a side piece and become Mormon or something. You'll have 3 people coming into the house with money.
Haven't heard that. Makes a lot of sense, especially with kids. It's I mean, so there's another process here. There's a woman named Miriam Salama who's an architect, and she has a project called the Henry Project. And what she does with people is you get a group of maybe 3 couples together, and you buy a house and then renovate the house because there are the size of the houses, there are these ridiculous houses, 400 square meters or something. And often they have one person living in them. So it was a family home. And then all the kids have moved away, and there's still, the husband died, and there's one woman rattling around in there. So then she dies, thing comes on the market, or she finally decides, I'm sick of mowing the lawn, and moves into a retirement village, sells out the house. So now you have this massive house. So an example that she gave was they buy a house with $1.2 million, right? That's a lot of money for a house. But then they spend another $300,000 on renovations and turn it into a 1-bedroom apartment and then 2 2-bedroom apartments. So the renovations is, put a staircase up out the outside. So the upstairs people have their own access. Put 2 mini kitchens in, and then maybe you leave the downstairs, the big living room, open plan kitchen kind of thing, so that you've got this tiny apartment that, is just enough room for you and your partner. But then when you want to have friends over, you say, Thursday night, I'm having a party here, so I'm having 15 friends over. You're welcome to join us. And then you've got that big common space to use. So that is, the people who are doing these alternatives are mostly, like most people in this industry, are shithouse at marketing. And so people don't know that they have a choice. So they say, I will never own my own home. Yes, you will never own a 3,000 square meter thing that you'll have to rattle around in, and you won't be able to find your kids because they're not in the 2nd theater, they're in the 3rd theater, and you forgot you had it. Hate it when that happens. But you could live in a house. So another woman that I spoke to, I love this. She said to me, so this is a couple of years ago. This is about 5 years back when I was speaking to her. And she said, I can borrow $500,000. That will buy me an apartment in Mosman Park. She was a person who traveled all her life. So she suddenly got to like 40 and said, I don't want to travel anymore. She'd worked in an industry where she got paid to travel. I can't remember what it was, but now she was finally, I want to be in one place. So $500,000 will get me a unit in an apartment block with meth heads in Mosman Park.
Oh,
that didn't seem attractive to her. But weird, huh? But she said, if I can find 2 other people that I can live with, then a $1.5 million house used to be a $2.5 million house, because this was at the time when the bottom had dropped out of the housing market. So, in one of those crashes, it's the top end that falls the most. The bottom end is always steady because there's always people who need small, cheap houses. But the top end had gone from, 2.5 is now 1.5. And in our conversation, people set priorities. In our conversation, she used the phrase ocean views 3 times. I said, sounds like the most important thing for you is ocean views. So it's like, yeah, by doing this, and yeah, who can afford a $1.5 million house? Nobody I know. But set it up in this kind of way, and suddenly ocean views are possible.
That's a great idea. That's actually, I've heard a lot of people advocate that style of housing here in the United States. And we, like you just said, they're really shit at marketing. And Andy and I have talked about this, I don't even know how many times now. The way you frame something affects everything related to the outcome. We're not framing anything in a positive way for communal type living. It's really, I don't understand why we're still enjoying the housing style we have now, because we're not framing that positively either. Things are pretty negative here in the United States right now.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you have these massive marketing budgets that are, you see an article in the newspaper, the pullout section every Sunday is all pictures of what you want to have, what you need to have in order to be happy and fulfilled as a human being is these kind of houses, marble floors, whatever it is. And so that's what people come to believe. You tell a lie often enough, it becomes the truth. But so people just don't realize, or they think, oh yeah, share house, but it doesn't have to be. It's not like a share house where it was an old house that you've got a bunch of bedrooms in and you're all fighting over the kitchen. It can be a house that's designed to have that many people living in it, or that's been modified. So you basically have your own space that you live in, except for when you want to be around other people. And that's, as you say, that's really what our role is. And then the talking about it is all about eco and green and these kind of things. And nobody's buying a house because it's good for the planet. We're the majority of people, some of my weird hippie friends, but people, it's like the last box they want to tick. Does it have 19 bathrooms? Does it have 3 theaters? Does it have stone bench tops? Oh, and it's made from some material, so it's good for the planet. Yeah, they've ticked all the other boxes. But what we really have to do is talk about how we're solving people's problems.
Well, I think that that's a perfect way to end the conversation. But before we go and go our separate ways here, Keith, can you tell our audience a little bit about what the Comfortable Home Project is and where they can find basically you and the things that you're working on?
So the way I describe the Comfortable Home Project is we are a marketing company without any clients. Most of the people who are working in this area are small businesses. They don't have any money to promote this, so I've just decided to do it. I'm working with 5 university students who are wanting to get experience in marketing. I have a team, which is very exciting after years of kind of doing this on my own. And what we are trying to do is, as much as possible, get the message out to people that there's an alternative to, I hate that word, there's a better way of doing housing than what is currently on offer, that it's a mature way of doing things, and that living in these houses is great. So if somebody's interested in this kind of, could they do housing differently? Our website is The Comfortable Home Project, all one word, .com.au. Got to remember the AU on the end.
For any of our listeners that are interested in checking out what Keith is working on, we will have a link on the social media posts, on the description under the video or the podcast episode that we release, and on the website. So you won't have to remember the .au at the end, because you'll be able to just click on it.
Thank God. I don't even remember it. And, there is a contact us. So if people have questions off of this, and when you put up your social media post, if you tag me into it, I'll answer any questions that people have. And and we'll have fun. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's been a fantastic conversation, Keith. So I want to thank you for being on the show, and we're looking forward to talking to you in the future if anything else comes up.
Yeah. Well, we could do another show, just an entire show talking about housing communities and co-housing and bow grouping and all that. It's another, and it's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down that is amazing as a solution to housing affordability and social disconnection. So yeah, if you get bored sometimes, let's talk about housing again because it's so cool. I'm your man. Cool. Thanks very much, Andy and Jerry. This has been great. Yeah.
Well, listeners, that's it for this week. So see you next week.
Yes. Cool. Thanks.
Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed that one. It was an interesting episode. I thought it was really cool. It doesn't sound amazing right off the bat, but it was a great conversation. But I enjoy talking to people.
So do I.
If you guys can't tell, Jerry's a little fucked up because he got his second dose of 5G this week.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I got sterilized last night because my fever was so high and I felt like shit. So
but it's
I'm
okay.
a little tired.
He doesn't want any more children, so who gives a shit?
I get my free government sterilization.
So anyways, thank you again for listening to Beautiful Bastards Podcast. Please take a few minutes to give us a rating on iTunes. It's a major part of keeping the wheels greased on this shit show, whatever the fuck. We don't even know what we're doing here anymore. And it helps us keep the lights on so we can keep bringing you new content. Remember, you can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, our website, anywhere else you stream your content from, and now YouTube. If you enjoy the show, you can find all our links at linktree/beautifulbastards. Or you can check out our website, beautifulbastardspodcast.com. Crikey!
Come check us out next week when I'm not dying of my COVID vaccine.